Welcome to the Ducks Unlimited podcast, the only podcast about all things waterfowl. From hunting insights to science-based discussions about ducks, geese, and issues affecting waterfowl and wetlands conservation in North America, we bring the resource to you. The DU Podcast with your host, Chris Jennings.
Today I've got a special guest, Chef Jean-Paul Bourgeois. He is a renowned chef. He's actually a celebrity chef, an avid waterfowl hunter from Louisiana. He's passing through Memphis. He decided to sit down and talk with us. Jean-Paul, welcome to the show.
Man, Chris, thanks for having me, man. This is amazing. It's an honor to be within these walls of Ducks Unlimited because from a time I was a little boy to today, I've been following along, and so just great to be able to sit down, talk some waterfowl recipes and cooking, and just have a little chat.
Awesome. I'm excited that you're happy to be here. First off, I just want you to provide a little bit of background for the audience, kind of let them know where you're from, your familiarity with Ducks Unlimited, and how you went from Louisiana to New York City.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I'm from Thibodaux, Louisiana, which is a little small town, a little bayou community, about 15,000 people in South Louisiana. And my dad was big into, as a sponsor and different levels in Ducks Unlimited as I was growing up. And my earliest recollection of duck hunting and waterfowl has been revolved around Ducks Unlimited. At Nicholls State University in their ballroom, I think they may still have their fundraising banquet there, but that's where I remember being 8, 9 years old and going to, the supper and the raffle and the auction that happened. Everything from, I was hooked. Everything from, the auctioneer and, can I get a 10? I got a 10. I got a 10. I got a 10. Can I get a 20? Can I get a 20? Yeah, 25. I got 25 back there. Can I get a 25? Can I get a 30? 30. And so I got hooked on it. And then there was always great food. And then there were always these, beautiful paintings, these shotguns, duck call contests. And I was just hooked, and I looked forward to it every October. I remember in the month, every October, to go to the DU banquet and dinner with my dad. And that I got my first shotgun was a 20 gauge youth model pump with Ducks Unlimited engraving on it. I was too young to even use the gun. It was too heavy for me. I couldn't and I was out hunting, I say hunting with my dad in the duck blind at 8 or 9 years old. It was a little too big and I had to switch to my grandpa's single barrel, crack barrel, 20 gauge, 3-inch shell. And until I got to probably 11 and 12 years old where I was able to handle that pump a little more. But so, Back in that time in South Louisiana, my dad and his friends, they were shooting the hell out of some ducks, and and everything from that banquet, that DU banquet, to that first gun to being in that cold duck blind with my old man, that really set the tone for the rest of my life as I'm 35 years old and love duck hunting even more, just as much as I did as a 9, 10, 11-year-old boy. Yeah,
and that's cool. And, it's so funny how many people, even throughout this building, people who work at national headquarters, people who work out in the regional offices, how they stumbled into the passion of Ducks Unlimited in the same way, listening to that auctioneer, getting your first gun, and then also spending time in the duck blind with friends and family. It's just it's a very common story, and it's a proud one for our organization for sure.
Well, let me tell you this: my Ducks Unlimited even sponsored my Little League baseball team for 4 years. Our team was DU. We had DU jerseys. My dad went all out, and he even took out his own money to get us fresh helmets with the DU logo on it. I bet you I got old film of those times, and we won the championship twice as Ducks Unlimited. We were the most sought after team in Little League to beat, and look, I'm telling you, it's been a part of my life for a long time, and not just hunting, and as you can see, even in sporting and community.
Yeah, and that passion, and obviously just from talking to you and sitting down with you today, I can tell that passion not only as a waterfowl hunter, as a conservationist, but also your food. Mm-hmm. You're passionate about food. How does that transition, you're talking about duck hunting here, and this is a conversation that we talk about every day, but you're in New York City.
Yeah.
You're cooking in restaurants in New York City, you're presenting different food and talking, you're friends with chefs throughout the city. How are you presenting that, hey man, let's go duck hunting and cook some ducks? Do you do that with these guys?
Well, what I have been good at over the last 5 years is going home, going to different areas around the country, whether that's Texas or the like Midwest plains or South Louisiana marshes, shooting ducks or shooting deer, shooting sandhill cranes or Canada geese, and dressing them, packing them, freezing them, and getting them in my cooler so I can bring them back to New York. I have a deep freezer just for wild game in New York. Now, I've been blessed over the last 8 months. We just moved into a new place in New York, but it has a backyard, it has a driveway, I have a garage. I can put all my gear in there.
Yeah.
So one of the greatest things I've been able to do is take out some of that game and have chefs from around the city come in, have people from my community group, have different folks from different circles in New York. And I'm talking about people that span from being from Singapore to the West Coast in California and everywhere in between. It's a worldly city, right? And so I think that's one of my greatest pleasures, to bring them into my house and cook for them and take right out of that freezer and say, this is what I hunted in January. This is what I hunted in November. And tell them the story about that and get them eating wild game through my backyard, right? And they've never had that opportunity to do that. So, and I love like just seeing their faces like, wait, you killed this? Wait, you shot this? Where'd you go for that? And, I wear a gold wood duck around my neck right here, and they're also, what is that on my neck? It's a wood duck. Well, what's a wood duck? Well, let me tell you what a wood duck. And it's just so these little opportunities to just talk to people about game hunting and wild game eating, and I think New York's such a great place to do that because not a lot of people know about it, and you can really see the excitement and wonder on people's faces as you talk to them about it.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's, we've kind of talked off very briefly, that organic from field to table approach that, some people don't really even realize that, that process of getting the fresh ducks or geese or deer, that's the food is what makes the connection. Yeah. And if you can connect the people to the food and they can connect it to the habitat as well. And that's kind of how Ducks Unlimited approaches this is as just as a kind of a 50,000 foot level. And I appreciate that you're out there, really introducing people to ducks. I mean, that's awesome. That's great for us. That's great for conservation.
Be the first to know when ducks are on the move. Sign up for DU's waterfowl migration email alerts and receive ongoing in-depth updates on the latest habitat conditions, weather changes, and hunting reports for your flyway. Visit ducks.org/migration alerts.
Quick question about, all of your different influences that you had, traveled the world, New York City, the worldly city, South Louisiana, which I would say is probably the best, place for food, in my opinion. I eat my way across Louisiana every time I go. But what chef or other like kind of personal homegrown influences have you had that you can take to wild game? Like you saw something that another chef has done and you're like, man, I'm doing that with a mallard. There's no doubt in my mind.
Yeah. Well, this has a lot of different levels for me. Growing up, there was a guy by the name Frank Davis who was a TV chef for a local news radio in New Orleans or Baton Rouge. And he would do a lot of fishing. They'd go out on the boat and they show him catching redfish and speckled trout. But he also did not as much game as fishing, but he did do duck, venison, sometimes small game like rabbit and squirrel, and he'd go out and make those recipes. And I think as a little boy, I immediately saw that, yes, like, getting to shoot a pintail, a mallard, a wood duck, some of these beautiful mounts, ducks that are great for mounting and so on. That's amazing. But there's also this connection with food and sustaining a way of life through the food and the things that you hunt. And yes, Frank Davis was a TV personality, but he knew how to connect the two worlds pretty seamlessly. Yeah. And as a young boy, I think he just passed a few years ago of a rare disease. And I was really sad to see that go, because I have all his cookbooks, back in the day. He had all these great kind of Cajun and Creole cookbooks. And through the years, I think just being able to travel the world, as I have over the last probably 10 years, I've gotten to do a good bit of international travel. And there's cultures all around this world that eat wild duck and wild game and their own wild species of whatever they hunt, right? And what you start to realize is that man, we may live miles and miles apart, but we're really not that different, especially when it comes to how we sustain our culture, how we sustain a culture of, knowing what you're eating, knowing where your food's from. I mean, that's this big know where your food's from, right?
Yeah.
How else are you going to know where your food's from? What better way to know where your food's from is when you go and harvest it yourself. And so, but there's people like Hank Shaw right now who I think is doing a wonderful thing through social media and his own website about telling his story of food through wild game. People like Jeremiah Daughtery and, all those people that are really committed to that from field to plate or from, sky to plate kind of eating. And I think as long as I'm cooking and loving food as much as I do, and just studying it, really studying, how things are prepared, why they're prepared, international cuisines, what's their influences. I'm going to always learn from both my peers, the people before me and the people after me.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you're saying everyone in the world puts Italian dressing on their mallards, right?
Yeah, look,
I'm just kidding.
I'm telling you this: if it ain't Italian dressing, it's garlic, chilies, vinegars, and oil-based marinades.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And when you distill it all down, I mean, like when I was in Argentina, the guy. He had his duck recipe published in a hunting magazine. It's called Aldo's Duck, right? It's marinated in white vinegar, shallots, parsley, tons of garlic, and olive oil.
Yep.
Man, that sounds pretty close to Italian dressing to me.
Yeah, it's pretty close. Hey, I'm down for it. Chef Jean Paul, thanks again, man. I really appreciate it. Hey, if people want to find you, where can they look you up?
Well, you can definitely hit me on Instagram at Chef Jean_Paul. So hit me up there.
Cool, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I hope you all enjoyed the show today. Thanks to our guest, Jean-Paul Bourgeois, for joining us in the studio, and thanks to Clay Baird for producing the DU podcast. He does a great job with it. I'm Chris Jennings. Thanks to all of you for supporting wetlands conservation.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the DU Podcast. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the show, and visit www.ducks.org/DU Podcast for resources based on today's topics, as well as access to more episodes. Opinions expressed by guests do not necessarily reflect those of Ducks Unlimited. Until next time, stay tuned to the Ducks.